Okay, what is Plan B? Before you decide what Plan B is, decide what kind of Plan A problems have to be solved. And I think a lot of people are getting this wrong because you hear people say, our real problem is there's no talent. Our real problem is we're not digital enough. Our real problem is there are too many pitches. Our real problem are the benchmarkers. And all of them add up to there's nothing we can do about it. We're just screwed, we're victims, and we just have to do the best we can. We have to win as much business as we can. We have to be as creative as we can under the circumstances. And even though we're on the losing side, we have to not be as big a losers as our competitors. I think that's wrong. I think that agencies today have misdiagnosed through the lack of the right kind of information about what really is happening to their business. And so I'm pleading with you today to think about a different type of Plan B based on what has not been working in Plan A. Plan A being the way agencies have competed with one another and with their clients over the last 30 to 60 years. And I'm going to have to talk about words that really have never had a place in the industry: price, productivity, and profitability. Okay? Price for agency services. The productivity of agency people in carrying out scopes of work. And the profitability that is associated with doing that well or doing that badly. Okay. Here's a real agency office. I've disguised it, calling it the Icarus agency. It is a client of mine, and they have 10 clients, which I've sort of used the military alphabet from Alpha to Juliet. 10 clients adding up to $23 million in sales. That's sort of a size of a typical agency office. Not a headquarters office, but a good-sized New York-based agency office. And you can see that the largest client is Hotel with 7.4 million. The smallest client is Foxtrot with 67,000 of income. And this is, when I asked finance to give me a view of each client in the way they kept their numbers, this is what they gave me. We've got the client name, we've got the fees that they're getting, we've got the full-time equivalents who are working on it, or at least are in the resource plan that was promised to the client, who add up to a certain number of hours, which was the basis for the agency being paid. And if you sort of divide the fee by the hours, you get the fees per hour. Now, there's a big variation in the fees per hour, because the lowest one is client Bravo at $54 per hour, and the highest is Juliet at $214. And you'd say, what could have possibly gone on that had a 4-to-1 difference in hourly rates? Well, it could be there are more senior people in it. It could be the competitive position of the client and they need more strategy work, or maybe they need heavy TV work, or who knows what. Or maybe it's the salesmanship of the agency in trotting out for whatever the client has agreed to for the fee. And in a lot of these cases, as I found out later, the client told the agency what the fee was going to be, because they said, well, we have a budget this year. I think it was a client Delta. We have a budget of $500,000. That's all we can spend. So, I mean, there's a lot that we can do, but we only have a budget of $500,000. And the agency said, well, you know, we got some good senior people we can put on. They have 2 FTEs, and they're getting $139 per hour. This averages out to $138 per hour for the 23 million and the 94 FTEs. That's client service, planning, creative, and production people. Now, if you do the math, and I'm sure most of you know how to do that, $138 per hour for 1,760 hours equals the fee, and then half of that, roughly is overhead and so on. If you do the math, that hourly billing rate supports people that are making between $104,000 and $111,000. That is not a lot of money. That is an average agency office whose average FTE on its clients are earning $104,000 to $111,000. I don't know how different it is here. Australian dollars, different salary levels, etc. But I can tell you that is not a lot of money. Now, it might be if you're hiring people, as they do in the States, right out of college at $30,000. When the consulting firms are hiring them at $75,000 right out of college, paying them a $20,000 signing bonus, we're up to $95,000, and giving them another $15,000 end-of-year guaranteed bonus, which takes them up to $110,000 their first year, knowing nothing. The difference in economics between the consulting firms and the agencies is all in the hourly billing rate. And the consultants are dealing with procurement too, but procurement's signing off on $500 an hour for an average team, as opposed to $138. But even though we can get insights from this type of a tableau, and by the way, not very often are these things all put up on, in one spreadsheet. Finance directors will look at client Foxtrot, what's the fee and how many people and why do you need freelancers and what are you going to negotiate next year? But to put them all up like this, it almost has to take an outsider to say, could I just see your data because I don't know anything about you. But here's what this tells me, and in fact this is what I saw when I went to Ogilvy 25 years ago. How much work are you doing for that? How much work are the 94 people doing, client by client? Well, they didn't have records of that. I had to go into what they call job jackets, like we paid Joe Blow, the photographer, so much for the Ford shoot. Oh, that was for a print ad. Then, I know I'm doing a print ad, etc. Took us 7 weeks to reconstruct the 360 briefs that Ogilvy UK was doing 25 years ago. Okay. Today, I'm working in Mexico. I've got 15 Mexican ad agencies. One of them has 12,000 briefs, and they're not huge. There's a lot of Facebook things. So you can imagine how much work it is to reconstruct the scopes of work for an agency that's doing 12,000 briefs across its 20 clients, compared to one agency doing 360 25 years ago. But today, what hasn't changed in the industry is nobody is keeping track of what work is going on, client by client, how much work that measures, and what that implies for the number of people working on it. And as a consultant, I could not figure, coming from the outside, I could not figure out what the hell is going on unless I know how much work are you doing, how much you're being paid for it, and how many people does it take client by client. And where that varies, why does it vary? Because that's the answer to figuring out who makes how much money. Okay, so I think of this as kind of a triangle. You've got how much work you're doing on the top, how much you're being paid, this is client by client, and then what kind of resource and cost do you put against that? Because if you have all three of these dimensions, then if you take the fees and divide it by the workload measured some way, you've got the price of the services. And if you have the resources, the headcounts, or the costs, and you've got the workload, you can say, how much is Darren Woolley doing? in our creative department? How much does the average creative have to crank out for this client? Now, then of course you've got income and cost, and agencies know what that number is, or at least they come close to it through timesheets and knowing we're making money, we're not making money. But they don't know that as well as they'd like because of timesheets. But still, at the end of the day, you know what an office profitability is. But I have not come across in 877 scopes of work that I've analyzed with my company in the last 25 years. I've not come a single one that had a scope of work that was usable for this purpose. So we have had to take whether scopes of work in PowerPoint, in Excel, in Word, back of napkins, reconstructed through interviews, reconstructed through Excel sheets, job jackets. We've had to do reconstruction for the last 25 years. And then there was the additional challenge of saying, well, a TV spot is not the same as a print ad, is not the same as a website or a landing page or a Facebook post. It's a very heterogeneous type of scope of work. And so what we need is to assign a value to each of the different types of deliverables that an agency does in accordance with perhaps how many creative man hours ought to take. Well, we found there were 4 dimensions, like the media type, TV, radio, print, direct marketing, blah, 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 social, digital, etc. The detail, is it a TV 30, is it a TV 15 cut down, is it what? Is it an adaptation or an origination? And is it low, average, or high creative complexity? A high creative complexity origination is usually for a product that's never been sold before, or a new vehicle, an automotive relaunch of the Toyota Corolla, new campaign. Whereas an adaptation, low creative complexity is that you cranked out 1 million, you're just doing another 1 million. And they have very low values. Anyway, we created a unit of work to cover the 7,000 different types of permutations and combinations of media type, media detail, origination, adaptation, 3 levels of creative complexity. So each one of them has a value so that we can say, if you did 1,000 briefs, that's 300 scope metric units, or it's 100 scope metric units, or it's 10, whatever. But you need a way of measuring workload. And by the way, this is not a tricky problem for this industry. It's doable. It's just that this industry's never done it. And it didn't do it, I think, because if we go back to the commission days, what was the point of keeping track of workload? You made so much money on commissions, you didn't need it. Besides, what matters is how much they spent on media, not how much work you were doing. So the industry, which developed a laissez-faire service attitude about workload many, many years ago when it was commission-based income, is now really up with its back against the wall because the workload has exploded in volume and nobody's keeping track of it. You got procurement cutting fees, and you've got marketing experimenting with scopes of work, and you're caught in the middle, assuming you're agency folks here. So figuring out price is important, but you have to understand how to do workload. Figuring out productivity is important because if there are huge differences, client by client, in price and in productivity, one of them is going to be right and one of them is going to be wrong. There are going to be low-priced clients. There are going to be clients that require an unacceptable amount of workload per creative. And that's what we're trying to figure out in order to analyze agency operations. Okay. Now, this shocking price curve is the results of price per scope metric unit among my clients over 25 years. I've taken inflation out, so this is in calculated in 2015 dollars US. But what it says, that first, and these are hundreds of thousands of dollars per scope metric unit. But don't get hung up about what a scope metric unit is. Think of it as a TV ad equivalent, okay? If everything were done in TV ad equivalents in the scope of work, you wouldn't be far off. Ogilvy, UK, in 2015 dollars was earning from its commissions and the amount of work it did $435,000 per unit of work. An ad agency today, if it's lucky, is earning $139,000. That has been a real 2/3 reduction in the price for what you're being paid. And this is consistent with every client that I've ever had, every agency I've had, every client within the agency portfolio. The reason the price curve is coming down is fees are being dropped and workloads are going up in an uncontrolled way. And if you divide one by the other, if you have a increased denominator and a declining numerator, then you have a declining ratio. And so agency workloads have gone up, agency fees have come down, therefore the price of agency services have declined in a regular fashion among my clients, and among, whenever I get a new client and look at it, there's somewhere around the $139,000 level. It'll probably be $125,000 next year, because what? Procurement's gonna cut even further, and the workload's gonna grow even further, and nobody is controlling it. No agencies control their price. It's being controlled by their clients. That's a very bad place to be when the clients are unhappy. Another thing happens when prices go down and you need to deliver a growing profit margin, which is what the holding companies require, you have to downsize. And when you downsize and the workload is going up, then the creatives have to crank out more work per head. And so these two, this is my experience with my clients. I've measured this from Ogilvy 1992, where they were doing 2.3 SMUs per creative, like 2.5 TV ads per creative, or 5 per team in a year. That's more than doubled today. And since I invented the SMU, I figured out what was the right level. And the right level for this unit of work was the average creative should do a little over 4 a year, because it was sized at about a TV ad. Well, you know, we blew right past that after 2005 because agencies have been downsizing to make holding company margins. The workloads have gone up in an uncontrolled way. So creatives today are doing over 5 on average. But I'm going to show you in a minute, if you look inside an agency office, there are clients where they're doing 10 to 20 SMUs per head because the fees are so terrible. So what have we concluded here? That you're in an industry with declining prices, declining headcounts, and growing workloads, and you're shoving more work through fewer people and stretching them. In addition, you've been shedding senior people because they're expensive and keeping junior people. So you have more work being done by fewer junior people, and they're not solving client problems, which is why clients are turning agencies over more rapidly and going in-house. I mean, this is a doom loop. And it's a doom loop as long as it continues without management getting in there and saying, we're going to do something about this. We have to do something about it. All right, here's the same Icarus agency, but I've put in, along with the fees, which you've already seen, the 23 million, I've put in the number of deliverables in the scopes of work. I've put in their scope metric unit value, and I've divided the fees by the SMUs to show the price. Now, if you assume that an SMU is a good homogenizer, that, I don't know, 30 Facebook posts are equal in effort to one TV ad, or something like that. If you assume that's okay, then an SMU is an SMU. And if you're being paid $34,000 per SMU by client Alpha, and $407,000 by client Juliet, one is paying a whole lot of money, and the other one's paying next to nothing. But the average is $139,000, which is just about where the industry average is today. So you go into an agency, you review the portfolio of clients, and you say, you know, this product that you're selling, which is the SMU, you're getting $34,000 from these guys, and you're getting $400,000. How come? And the how come is that nobody has the slightest idea of how much work they're doing. The agency management doesn't have the slightest idea. The CEO of the office has no idea what's going on in each of the 10 clients. The CFO has no idea what work is going on. None of the client heads know what's going on in each other's business. Whatever they are dealing with, they're dealing with as best they can. And they're under a lot of pressure. Particularly client Alpha here, which is $1.5 million, you know, it's a reasonable sized client, is doing a ton of digital and social work, 444 briefs, and getting very little money for it, having 2.3 creative FTEs to do 40 SMUs, so they're doing nearly 20 SMUs per head when the standard is 4 to 5. So they're cranking out 5 times as much as they can. They're going crazy, people are quitting. But nobody can say, well, the reason that's happening is because we're doing 5 times as much output on this client as we are on the average client in the office. And then, in the high-price client, Juliet at $400,000, doing 15 deliverables for 8.7 SMUs, a lot of TV work. They're only doing 2 SMUs per head. They're pretty comfortable. Now, I'll tell you, I said to when we went through this, I said, you know, thank God you've got these clients that are above 139,000. You know, you've got Golf Hotel India Juliet that are above that, and the others are below, because they're shoring up, for the office sake, the profitability. But if your client ever gets wind of the fact that they're paying well over the odds for your resources, you're in trouble. And guess what? I mean, honest to God, I didn't know anything about it, but they lost their top 2 clients. They had to, about 3 months later, they had to downsize by a third, and they really have not recovered because they had to go through a major downsizing without the cash cows. So, you're kind of screwed if you're being underpaid. You're in danger and vulnerable if you're being overpaid in today's market. You cannot take comfort in having a portfolio of clients in which half of them are holding up the other half, and that you're okay for the holding company on average. By the way, on average isn't very good because, as we know, the average billing rate here is $138 an hour, which is only supporting $100,000 to $110,000 people. So you don't have a huge talent pool on that basis. This is a scary situation, and this is typical of what I find today in every agency I diagnose. And it's a one-off diagnosis. Nobody ever sees this because nobody has any workload metrics. So CFOs can only look at the profitability. It is quite possible that every one of these clients is earning a 15% margin. And that's why client Alpha only has 2 people for a ton of work, because they're making a margin. They've allocated the resources in proportion to the fee and not in proportion to the work. That's the way agencies work today. That's what finance directors will do. They say, what is this, a $2 million client? Well, you can afford X number of people. That's how many we'll give you. And nobody knows how much work is involved. Actually, if you graph any office, it looks like this. The balls there are the clients. The price along the horizontal axis is the price per SMU, from high on the right to low on the left. And then up and down, it is the FTEs, or the number of people per SMU. And the red clients are underpaid and under-resourced. And these other ones that are supposed to be green are overpaid and over-resourced. And the average is where those lines cross. Here's the problem. That vertical line, which is set at $139,000 per SMU, is moving to the left every year because the industry price is coming down. So what's happening is all of these balls are getting shoved to the left. And that means that the resources are everything's being shoved to the lower left-hand corner. So that means that over time, even a stable portfolio of clients, with no new ones, no old ones, is going to show a deterioration in the amount of people that can be placed against the workload. Because we can expect the workloads go up every year and the fees come down. So even in a stable situation, if workload is not being controlled or measured or negotiated for fees, the average agency portfolio will get worse in quality. In other words, the productivity will go up, meaning more work per creative, and the price per SMU will go down. It's a combination of this, which is a static view, and that price curve which I showed you, which is shoving everything to the left. The other one, which is a little more meaningful, goes down the other way. This is creative output per creative on the left-hand axis against the same clients arrayed by price per SMU. So, upper left-hand corner, agencies cranking out a huge amount of work per head on the creatives for being low-priced. Understandable. Low-priced, few resources, a lot of work. Whereas down here, the big fat clients that are paid well have enough creative resources to do the work comfortably, and somewhere there is an average. But it still means that a big proportion of the portfolio is under-investing, and those clients are at risk. Those clients on the left-hand side are at risk for quality. The clients on the right-hand side are at risk for overcharging. The whole portfolio is at risk, and this is the standard situation today of ad agencies. It isn't the standard way people think about what the agency problem is, but as soon as you measure workloads, this is what emerges. Okay, what about profitability? In a way, during the commission era, agencies could afford senior people, very high priced, lots of resources. Ogilvy had 3, 4, and 5 teams on every client back in 1992. That's why they weren't making any money. That's what we discovered. There are no more multiple teams today. It's just gone. And the teams are more junior and underpaid. There's been a real serious deterioration in real dollars, take inflation out, in what average pay levels are and average billing rates. So there's been a decline in the composition of the headcounts. And I'm going to show you, this is a little unfair to Saatchi, but what the hell. Kevin Roberts, the CEO of Saatchi, wrote the foreword to my book and argued with me. And he was a client, he argued with me about a lot of things, so I don't mind picking on him, who is now gone and who made some unflattering remarks about women, which cost him his job at Publicis. Let's look at Saatchi. A person 1 year out of college in an agency at Saatchi, US, according to Glassdoor.com, makes $52.9 thousand. That strikes me as a high number, having looked at their salaries, but I'll accept at Glassdoor.com that an account executive, a relatively junior account person, makes 52,000 US dollars. Billing multiples, that's what do we charge the client as a multiple of salary. You know how procurement does it. It's direct cost plus overhead rate plus profit margin equals blah, blah, blah. They don't quite do that at the consulting firms. The consulting firms just tell them what the hourly rate is. Take it or leave it. But when you look at that, billing multiples for a 15% margin and a 1 times overhead rate, agencies are marking up their people 2.3 times. So a $100,000 person is being billed out at $230,000. Typical. 15% margin, 1 times overhead rate. 5 times salaries at Bain, McKinsey, BCG, Deloitte, Accenture. That's just, it has been standard for 30 years. That's where it is today, and procurement accepts it. So if you work that out, given the differences in the salaries, the Saatchi and Saatchi 1-year person is being billed out at 66 an hour, and the Bain guy is being, or gal, is being billed out at 214. Why? I mean, the quality of the person could be comparable. And I think it comes down to this. So I've pulled this off of the Bain website, but having spent a big part of my career there, I know it to be true. Right off of the website, in the part called performance improvement, they say, our client, we're the best consulting firm for companies that are committed to quickly achieving and sustaining their full potential. Meaning, you're operating here, you want to be there. You want to grow, you want to be more profitable. Our clients realize, on average, results yielding 25 times returns on our fees and margin improvements of 7 percentage points within 2 or 3 years. A large amount of effort in a consulting relationship goes into negotiating the relationship and what's going to be done. Why are we going to work together? And the consulting firm will usually require that they develop a view of what the full potential of the client is, and that forms the basis of the consulting relationship. So, if you're a big advertiser and you're growing at 3% per year and you figure you should be growing at double the rate, then the consulting firm would say, we will put together a relationship based on our doubling the rate of growth over the next 5 years. And that will form the basis of our scope of work, of our budget, and of the need for a commitment for a long-term relationship, okay? And we expect to deliver an X time return. If the return is big enough, who cares whether it's a 5 times multiple on fees? I've pulled this off of Saatchi. It's one of the worst websites in the industry. And I didn't pick it because of that. I honestly picked it because I worked with Kevin. Okay. It is all over the map what the purpose is. Our purpose, we have a dream to be revered as the hothouse for world-changing creative ideas that transform our clients' businesses, brands, and reputation. It isn't what they actually do, though. Spirit, one team, one dream, nothing is impossible. Beliefs, love marked beyond brand, blah, blah, blah. But you get down to the greatest imaginable challenge, and it says to transform our top 20 offices from good to great. I'll tell you, I wouldn't pay 5 times multiple to help them go from mediocre to okay. Or to fill the world with love marks, which is the other focus. I mean, they're huge. Procter & Gamble is their largest client. General Mills was their second largest client. They just got fired from that. Toyota, worldwide, is sort of next in line. They do a fabulous job with Toyota in the States. They got fired in Europe because they are not focused on achieving client needs. They don't ask about it. They don't have the capability of figuring out what needs to be done to make it better. And except in certain pockets. I think their LA office is fabulous, but it's a different group of people. And what they do there has nothing to do with what they do anywhere else. But this comes from the CEO. This is the CEO's vision, and it's a highly romantic and qualitative vision for the kind of dialogue that he or she can have with the creative staff, or maybe even in new business situations. But it doesn't say anything about what is going to deliver a return for the clients, because while this might have worked a long time ago when TV advertising was new, and really creative TV advertising really drove brand growth, it is not true today. And whatever this is a vision for, it is not a vision for what the problems of clients are today. And a lot of agency websites are sort of variations on this. Inward-looking, narcissistic, about creativity, but not really saying, we're really good at figuring out how to make you better, which is what clients need, and that's what CMOs and their CEOs need today to invest money in more media spend, in agency fees, and higher multiples for your services. So I think in the end, plan A, if that is plan A, which is strong belief in 1960s creativity, don't track workload, don't negotiate workload, do whatever the client wants to have done at whatever fee they're prepared to pay. I think that everything else that we're seeing in the industry is a symptom of that plan A, that set of beliefs. I think the loss of AOR status, the in-house agencies, the pitching process, the loss of respect, the decline in fees, the experimentation with workloads. I think all of that are symptoms of a business concept that worked a very long time ago with when the world was at a different place in terms of media types and underlying GDP growth. We're in a different place today. And that business model is held intact by many agency leaders. You see it all the time. New CEO comes into an agency and they say, we're going to get back to basics, we're going to invest in creativity, we're going to win awards, we're going to do this, that, and the other. And the truth of the matter is, nobody's paying for that. And procurement's going to continue to cut the fees, and marketing is going to continue to grow the workloads, and the prices are going to continue to come down, and agencies are going to continue to downsize. And pretty soon the holding company share price is going to run out of steam, and then the analysts are going to say, what the hell has been going on here? So let's decide what's wrong with Plan A. Agencies have not exercised control over pricing. Pricing is in decline because workloads have been ignored. With declining prices, agencies have downsized. With downsizing, agencies have eroded their capabilities. With eroded capabilities, agencies have failed to solve complex client brand growth problems. With eroded capabilities, they fail to solve the problems, and therefore, pricing is the #1 problem in the industry. Getting control of pricing means getting control of workloads. Getting control of workloads means negotiating fees on a different basis. Negotiating fees on a different basis can only succeed if the agency mission is a different one. So it may sound like a simple thing to say, hey, you guys have got to get control of pricing, but you know what it means? It means changing the whole way you think about the business. Why you exist, what you have to keep track of, who's accountable for what, and how you negotiate being paid. And that's a complete change of culture, and there aren't many CEOs that want to take that on at this point in their career, when many of them are making 7-figure salaries for doing Plan A. delivering to the holding company. So this is a really tough turnaround situation because the leadership isn't young enough to care. They're not going to have to live with the consequences.